Hi everybody, this is God's Girl G, and thank you so much for joining me today. For those of you who are new to my channel, welcome. And for those of you returning to this channel to view this video and you're not already subscribed, I'm going to encourage you to do so by clicking the subscribe icon below. And if during the course of this video you hear something that you like, click the thumbs up, comment below, or better yet, share this video with someone who you feel could benefit from the information. With that said, let's get into today's discussion. Realization of personal failure is something that can be tough to deal with. And all of us will experience at least one major failure in our lifetime. Now, it's easy when our friends come to us telling us of their failure and we say, "Oh, you'll get over it. It'll pass." And although that statement is true, they will get over it and it will pass. The reality is that personal failure and getting over it, it's a process. I have personally dealt with a couple of major failures in my decades here on this earth. Failure in relationships, job, finances, you name it. Been there, done that. And in those moments of failure, it's easy to entertain thoughts that you've blown it, that God can no longer use you, and that there is no hope for restoration. And I'm sure many of you can relate to that level of thinking because we all face these feelings when we fail. We feel we have let others down, ourselves, and certainly let God down. But when you have a true revelation of who God, the Father, is, you know and you realize that He is for us and not against us. And He's all about redemption. So when we fail, we can be thankful that God loves a good comeback story. The Apostle Paul reminds us that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. This should give us hope that no matter what we've done, our life's adventure is not over. God's at work reclaiming our story. No aspect of life's journey goes to waste, including the failures that we make. He uses even our failures to demonstrate lessons learned, to grow and mature us. Now, before some of you mature Christians agree too quickly, just know that age and experience does not mean that you won't make any more mistakes. Even some of the most mature, devout of us are subject to human frailty and mistakes. So just because you've been following Jesus for some time, you're not immune. That's what we find out about one of Jesus's disciples, Peter. One of the amazing aspects of Peter's life is his recovery by God's grace from one of the most public failures and one of the deepest embarrassments of all time. Peter is forever on record for denying Christ, not once, not twice, but 3 times. Peter is the premier example of God's hope. Hope for a new start, hope for complete forgiveness, and hope in the God of a second chance. What can we say about Peter? He's brave, impulsive. He's known for putting his foot in his mouth, losing his cool, and literally being called Satan by Jesus. Loud and impetuous, Peter was the biggest personality in any room. It's no wonder he joined James and John as one of Jesus's closest friends and confidants. In fact, he was one of the only disciples willing to walk on water and was the first to call Jesus the Christ, the Son of the living God. When Jesus predicts that Peter would deny him, Peter proudly rebuffed him in very Peter fashion. But that very night, after Jesus is arrested, someone confronts Peter and accuses him of being a follower of Christ. And just as Jesus predicted, Peter denies him 3 times. And the third time, he added some cussing to it, just to make his point clear. When he realizes what he'd done, he breaks down and weeps bitterly. What was Peter's deal? How does someone go, in a matter of hours at most, from being a fanatic, willing to pull out a sword on an angry mob, cut off the ear of the soldier in the process to defend Jesus, to a weeping man who won't even admit to a servant girl that he even knows Jesus? What's up with that? Did Peter's failure exclude him from Christ's plans? On the contrary, Peter is the first of the 12 that Jesus appears to. He restores Peter in a very touching moment on the Sea of Galilee. And Peter goes on to become the leader of the disciples, preaching the first evangelical message during Pentecost, after which more than 3,000 people get saved. What many people forget is that Peter, having failed Jesus at a very crucial moment, made up for his failure many times over. He devoted the rest of his life to spreading the message and story of Jesus. He was imprisoned not once, not twice, but 3 times for his persistence in preaching and teaching. He was, tradition tells us, finally put to death because of his unwavering love for God. I believe that Peter came to the realization that failure is an event and not who you are. Failure is never final if you have the God-given desire and direction to change your destiny. After sharing with you Peter's story, I want to share with you some considerations. 3 involve steps that help process failure, while the other 3 are tips on how to survive failure. So here are 3 foundational steps to help process failure. 1, acknowledge that you have failed and your role in the process. Without this step, you're destined to repeat this. Prayer, meditation, and just thinking through things will help with this step. 2, pray and ask God to help you through the process of bouncing back from failure. Remember, He's always there in the good and bad times for our successes and, yes, our failures. 3, God has forgiven you, so make sure you forgive yourself. To sum up what C.S. Lewis says about forgiveness, if God forgives us, we must forgive ourselves. Otherwise, it's almost like setting up ourselves as a higher authority than Him. Next, here are 3 tips on surviving failure. Tip number 1, we do not have to be alone in our sufferings. We've been given a cloud of witnesses that can identify how messy life can be. We can take heart because we can get through our challenges and failures. 2, God's grace is sufficient. It's what the gospel is all about, redemption. 3, be careful of those naysayers. The devil's going to try it. He'll try to use every opportunity to kick you while you're down. And naysayers will be dispatched in full force. But don't listen to their calls and cries to celebrate your demise. Just know that there's always going to be people trying to celebrate your failures. But true friends will be there to celebrate your successes and comfort you through your failures, whether caused by sin or by the many things that can happen beyond our control. All failure teaches us the important truth of just how desperately we need God and His mercy and grace in our lives. Sometimes our failures are mirrors of reproof, but always they can become tools for growth and deeper levels of trust and commitment to God if we will respond to them as such, rather than rebel and become hardened through difficulty. As we saw in Peter's story, failure was not his destiny, and neither is it yours. Just like Jesus brought Peter up, God is calling you up. just like Peter, to the upper room, where Peter had his most powerful experience after his worst mistake. So maybe you did fail, but you're not a failure. You made a mistake, but you are not a mistake. There is life after a fall. God's grace always extends beyond your worst decision. Thank you so much for joining me today. And don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Bye.